So the focus of today is an introduction to WHONET 2024. Sometimes people wonder why WHONET 2024 would not be available in January of 2024 or February 2024. The reason is that the number 2024 refers to the year of the breakpoints. The EUCAST breakpoints are available in January, typically. The CLSI breakpoints are often not available until February or March. Therefore, we cannot release the new version of the software until the new version of the CLSI breakpoints are published. And then we do need to load them into WHONET, and that takes some time. And then we also try to get other features that we'd like to have in before we release. And often we'll release the software without making an announcement, and then we make this kind of big announcement. And we hope to have this kind of annual update every year about the new software and the new features. So this is a summary of the webinars we have had in the past, starting last September. September, WHONET and WHO GLASS. We possibly will repeat that maybe later this year if needed. October, WHONET macros, reports, and quick analysis. November, WHONET and multi-drug resistance. We looked at that both from an advocacy perspective about multi-drug resistance is bad and it's getting worse. Also for tracking to facilitate outbreak detection, using the phenotype as a proxy for the genotype to facilitate clonal phenotypic tracking. We had two WHONET webinars about outbreak detection, part 1 and part 2. Today's webinar is the WHONET 2024 introduction. It is likely that the next one will finally be antibiograms. Wanted to have that earlier in this year, but there are some new features that we are working on that are not yet available. I will mention some of those later, especially as it regards some of the new European categories for interpretation. Once we all have all of that in, then we can have the session on antibiograms. Other sessions, the automation tool, DHIS2, the WHONET AST interpretation engine. I will talk a bit about that later today, not in depth, but I'll talk a bit about it today. If there is interest, we can also have a full webinar dedicated to that. I will also discuss a bit today the WHONET discussion forum as a resource for communication, questions, and answers. Today, I will also cover a little bit of the WHONET One Health features, but we can also have a dedicated one later. Especially, we would love to do that in collaboration with FAO. Also, we're very open to other ideas for webinars, big webinars, small webinars, different languages. So thank you for your interest, and we're happy to work with you to meet your needs. So the focus of today, we'll talk about 4 areas. First, I will start with a review of the WHONET website. How do you get WHONET 2024? Very excited about the new WHONET online training course. It's been many, many years in coming. So finally, we now have it operational. I will talk about that later, as well as the WHONET discussion forum. I'll talk a bit about breakpoints, the CLSI breakpoints, the European breakpoints, the interpretation categories, and that AST test interpretation engine. I'll talk about WHO GLASS modules generally, but specifically the GLASS modules that we support within WHONET, and finally, some of the animal health and One Health features of the software. Let's start with part 1, WHONET website, WHONET 2024 materials. Where can we find those? So I will now close my PowerPoint. I do think I need to, leave that. And I will now switch over to the website, whonet.org. Adam, could you confirm everyone now sees the website?
We see that.
Thank you. Sometimes I think you have to stop the PowerPoint for that to happen, so I did that. So here's whonet.org, and you see the main page, and here you see WHONET 2024, so we have updated it. We've provided links about the new features, and there's a page here. I'll click on that in a few moments. If you have trouble installing WHONET, or if you have WHONET on a Macintosh, you'd like to do that, we have installation issues that you can review. For summary of some of the most important new features, we will click here, and then the details down here. Okay. There is an important distinction in computers between 32-bit computers and 64-bit computers. Actually, almost all computers today are 64-bit. So it's not an issue of 64-bit. Most people have 64-bit computers. And most people also have 64-bit versions of Microsoft Office. However, most people have 64-bit computers, 64-bit Office. There are some computers that do have 64-bit computers, but a 32-bit version of Office. So if you are in that situation that you have a new computer but an old 32-bit version of Office, we would recommend this one called the WHONET 32 bits. I will review how you know which one you have. As far as WHONET's concerned, either version should work perfectly fine, except if you're exporting to Word or exporting to Excel. Those are Microsoft products. So for most people, it doesn't matter whether you download the 32-bit or the 64-bit. For most people, we would recommend the 64-bit. But if you do have an old version of Office, then the 32-bit version will give you better compatibility. In the long term, hopefully we can have one version. We don't need to separate the two. But at the present time, you do need to separate between 64 bits and 32 bits. It's a bit of an annoying detail, but we want to make sure you start off on the right foot. Most people just download the 64-bit version of WHONET, unless if you know that you have an older version of Office, and I will review how you know which version you have. On the main page, you see information for the user community, including the discussion forum, the training center, WHONET users survey. We used to send that out annually. We'd like to start doing that again, just to get a better use around the world of who you are, where you are, as well as what your needs are. And if you'd like to be on the mailing list, then you can also click there. Feel free to share these resources with your colleagues just to expand our mailing list and their access to our materials. So let's see, just to look a little bit at this. Here you do see detailed notes about each WHONET release. Most of you will not see that. It's less important. I'm going to start with that. And here you see version, I'll go down here, WHONET 2023. And you see, starting at the very beginning of, so 2023, here it says version 2023, May 15th, May 18th, May 25th, June 1st. So if you want to know exactly what is going on with WHONET, we tell you that, for example, here on July 13th, these are the small features that we changed. So this is a detailed review of exactly every change we're doing all along the way. That's much too detailed for most people. So most people, we don't recommend you look at the release notes, but they are there. More important is this one here, the new features of WHONET 2024. So I will click on that. So this is a lot of what we're going to talk about on the call today. The breakpoints, the new categories, GLASS support, One Health. So this page itself is a bit of a summary of today's presentation. If people have no idea what WHONET and Backlink are, they could just start at this first one. What is WHONET? What is Backlink? If you click here, it does introduce you to a bit about the purpose of the software, about WHONET data entry. So it's a little bit of a high-level introduction to the tools. Okay, so that's the WHONET main page. So you can get the WHONET software directly from this page. Most people, the 2024 64-bit, but some of you, the 32-bit. And I'm going to come back to that again. So how do you know which one you need? Here we have the other pages, software. Here you see WHONET 2024. That's the same thing that you have on the first page. You can download it from the home page, or you can download it here. It's the same software, the same everything. The WHONET automation tool, this is a very valuable software that in my own hospital and in a small but growing number of international colleagues, they have WHONET running automatically every day, once a week, once a month, where if you can automate your data exports, we can automate the imports, the analyses, the reports, the notifications. It can be information for the data manager. The data are missing, the password is changed, the analysis went too fast or too slow, suggesting there was a problem. Those would be automated alerts for the data manager. There can also be automated alerts about possible outbreak detection or important results like VRSA. So this will be an important subject of a future webinar, because many people think of antimicrobial resistance surveillance as a once-a-year activity. When they prepare their annual antibiograms nationally or hospital-specific, laboratory-specific, National reviews, annual reviews of data is important once a year, but there's so much additional value on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis in terms of identifying threats, confirming threats, identifying mistakes, laboratory errors, and fixing those in real time, and outbreak detection. So the automation tool is part of that so that you do not have to do everything manually. The AST interpretation engine, I will talk about that later today. I just said AST. AST stands for antimicrobial susceptibility test, but not everyone knows what AST means. So instead of calling it the AST engine, we decided to call it the AMR engine because people are more familiar with AMR, meaning antimicrobial resistance. So that will be on today's call. At the bottom, we still have our very old WHONET 5.6 software. We haven't touched it in about 6 years. We do keep the breakpoints up to date periodically on request, but we do very much recommend moving to the newer versions, WHONET 2023, 24, because you will have the new features, the bug fixes, the updated breakpoints, everything. So if you do use WHONET 5.6, it still works, but we do encourage you to have a migration strategy, and we'd very happy to help you with that. Other things on this page are the training center, so I'm going to come back to that in a few moments. The webinars, this is what I mentioned earlier. What you see in front of you is a description of today's webinar. Here down below, you see, if I open up our January one, you see a description of the January webinar, you see the YouTube recording, and you see the slides that were presented. So all of the webinars, including today's, information is saved here. You see here in the menu, the discussion forum. You log in, you create a login if you would like, and you can post questions, answer questions, make announcements. We can respond from Boston, but you can also respond to each other. So we'll talk about that further today. We'll now close that particular page. I'm back at the main menu, top right. If I click on About, it tells you a little bit about the software. Contact. You can send us a message here. You can get our contact details or sign up for the mailing list. Okay, good. I'm going to go back to software just to emphasize this point about 32 or 64-bit. Most of you, again, will be the 64-bit because you have modern computers with modern Windows. I'm sorry, I meant to say modern Office. I think all of you have 64-bit computers. They stopped selling 32-bit computers many, many years ago, but 32-bit Office still exists. So how do I know which version of Office do I have? I can open up any Windows product. For example, I'll do this once with Excel, and then I will repeat it with Word. I simply open Excel. Excel is now open. Here on the left, you see on the menu, it says Account. I'm going to click on Account. And I have a new option here on the right called About Excel. About Excel. And on the very top row, it tells me that I have the 64-bit version of Office. I'm going to click on OK. Let me repeat that using Microsoft Word. I click on Word. Left, I click on Account. I click on About Word. It tells me again, it's a 64-bit Office. It has to be. It has to match the Excel. If I go to PowerPoint, it will show me the same thing. So if you have the 64-bit version, please download the 64-bit version of WHONET. If you do not, as I mentioned, WHONET itself will still work. It's not a problem for WHONET. The problem is when you try to export to Office, because then you want it to match. If you have an incompatibility issue, we can usually fix it with you. Not always. Sometimes there are compatibility problems. We've already removed most of those compatibility issues. We're working to completely eliminate these compatibility issues. But if you see error message H result, or you see a message about database engine, it's when you're making an Excel or a Word export. So if you see that, make sure you align 32-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit, 64-bit, or just write to us and we'll give you assistance by email or on a support call. So I won't download the software. It's already been downloaded and installed. So let's see. That's all I have to say now about the website. Now I'm going to go to the training center. So we're very excited about this. It's been a very long time coming. The PowerPoint, we've had the PowerPoints a long time, but to make the videos and make the transcripts and the exercises has taken a while. Here you see that there are 6 modules. Introduction, laboratory configuration, data entry, data analysis, introduction, data analysis interpretation, quick analysis reports. All of these videos are 25 minutes about, except for number 5. Number 5 is a bit too long. We're going to cut it in half. So part 1, part 2. So this will be 7 modules, but right now it is 6 modules. You listen to the YouTube video. You can download, you can also download the PowerPoint. You don't need to download the PowerPoint because it's in the video. But if you'd like to download the PowerPoint, you can do that. You can download the manual. You don't have to download the manual. It's there if you want it. But for the course, you would take the video and you would take the exercises. The exercises are all currently in Microsoft Word. So for example, I will, go to data. It doesn't matter which one. I'll go to data analysis. It is now open. I'll open the document in Word. And it says, do this, click here, choose E. coli, click on this, click on that. It's telling you exactly what to do. Close that Word document. So the video, you can listen to the video passively. Just sit there for 25 minutes, listen to the video, stop it if you would like, review it, fast forward, reverse. And then after you listen to it passively, then you can go through the exercises at your own leisure. Personally, I'm the kind of person I like to do the video and the things at the same time. You can also do that if you're fast. Listen to the video and practice on your own. We did not design it for that. We did design it that you listen to the video attentively, and then after you finish the video, then you do the exercises. So that's the WHONET training course. What is missing from this page are the exams. I'm going to show you a different page that it's called the PATH WHONET training. There are a number of PATH staff members here on the call. PATH is an NGO, non-governmental organization based in Seattle, and we are running a training course for them starting now. So for them we're doing 2 different things. Is we're giving them the exams. Right now we have to, the exams are scored partially automatically, partially manually. We're not ready to open the exams to the world yet. So with the PATH organization, we're validating the exams, making sure they're good questions. For example, if I click, for example, here on, Introduction to WHONET, the exam is in SurveyMonkey. Question number 1 is, who are you? Question 2, were you able to install WHONET successfully? Yes or no? Yes would be great. No, you can say the troubles you had. And then for those PATH staff members, we will help you to finish the installation. The last question, number 7, so there are 5 real questions. There are 5 scored questions. We give you a grade, correct or incorrect. Question number 1 is, who are you? Question number 7, if you have suggestions, corrections, or comments on the presentation, then please let us know because we do want to make these better. So the PATH training is happening over the next few weeks. So by the end of July, I think we will be happy with the exams and the materials. We'll make revisions, and then we can also make the exams available to the world. And with the successful completion, then we can give a certificate of completion. So, and that's all in SurveyMonkey at the present time. So we're doing 2 different things for PATH. One is the exams, because it's the first time we're doing exams, so we're waiting for their input. Once the exams are ready, they'll go onto the public website. The other thing we're doing is a hybrid module. In addition to the self-paced online course, we are also offering them online sessions. Session 1 covers modules 1 to 3. Session 2 covers modules 4 to 6. Different time zones for the Americas and Africa, different option for Africa and Asia. We cannot give this to everybody all of the time, but in collaboration, we can discuss this possibility of a hybrid approach. Everybody in the world can do the self-paced online course. This idea of the live sessions is something that we can offer in a webinar like this or other smaller venues, such as what we are doing with PATH. So let's see, I'll go back to the WHONET page. I think that's all that I have to say about the training center right now. I'm happy to answer any questions on it later, but we're very pleased with that. Okay, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Website review, we've done this slide. The training course is currently at the website I just told you, or simply just go to whonet.org and click on Training Center from the top menu. There are 6 modules, as you just heard. Modules 1, 2, and 3, installation, configuration, and data entry. Modules 4, 5, and 6, data analysis and interpretation and quick analysis. One of them is a bit too long, so we're going to split it into 2 parts. The course includes PowerPoint, YouTube presentations, exercises, exams, and of course, completion certification. Right now, we host everything on the website I just showed you, the whonet.org. Our plan for a while has been to then post it to the Open WHO platform. I will show you that website. However, the Open WHO I think Open WHO was maybe created, I'm not certain, maybe 2011, 2013. It's a long-standing platform for WHO for training activities. But there's a new group called the WHO FAO Academy, which is actually, so the Open WHO team, it's a small team based in Geneva. There's a new building called the WHO Learning Academy in Lyon, France. So WHO is centralizing all of their training activities around the Learning Academy, the organization of courses, the development of courses, conduct of courses in person in Lyon or remotely. I'll show you both of those websites. OpenWHO. OpenWHO.org. So if I click here where it says channels, you see there's a channel, there are many channels, COVID, tuberculosis, vaccination, TB. There's a channel called antimicrobial resistance. Most of this is not about resistance. Most of this is about stewardship. Most of this is about antimicrobial use. You see it's available in many languages, in various languages. So these courses are currently available on the OpenWHO course. Starting the next few months, they are moving over to the FAO Learning Academy. I'll now show the FAO Learning Academy. I'm sorry, not FAO, I didn't mean to say that, the WHO Academy. The WHO Academy has its own website. Not only do they have their own website, they have their own brand new building. The building did not exist in 2015. We had a call yesterday. They're currently at the WHO IHR laboratory office, but they anticipate going live in the building in the next few months, maybe September, October. They will have their inauguration of the building. So many of you in the future might have the opportunity to go to Lyon for training activities, or more likely you'll benefit from their activities remotely through their online courses. So currently what is happening is the Open WHO courses, most of them are being migrated over to the FAO Academy, with the exception of things related to epidemics and emergencies. So things like COVID, violence, floods, those will be retained by Open WHO, but more general training activities will be migrated over to the to the WHO Academy. So I'm going back to my slide, showing where's my slide? So as I said on this slide, we were planning to do Open WHO, and but the new goal will be to go to the WHO Academy. The WHO Academy is the WHO's Institute for Learning. Our online platform leverages machine learning, the modern technologies for learning. The WHO Academy will open to all learners in December 2024, both online and at our new campus in Lyon. So we, the WHONET team, we anticipate that an adapted version of the course that I just showed you will also be hosted by FAO. So FAO also has 2 platforms. Let's see if I can go back to here. So the one that we will probably be using is the FAO Virtual Learning Center, or FAO Virtual Learning Centers. You can see the different courses that they offer, my courses, where you can sign up and you can register and you can sign up for those courses. FAO also has their e-learning academy. Personally, I'm not exactly sure the differences at some point when it's necessary for our work, but we were given the guidance so far to focus on the Virtual Learning Center. So the course will mostly be the same. Data entry, installation, configuration is the same, but the analysis examples will obviously be customized for the One Health or the animal and the food needs. So let's see, that's the end of this slide. And the FAO training, well, I just did. I already just showed you the demonstration. I did not show the PowerPoints, but they're all on YouTube as well. You don't have to go through the WHONET website. You could just go directly to YouTube. And Adam, if I make any mistakes, just please correct me. Thank you. Okay, good. The discussion forum. I will now show you the discussion forum. We put this up quite a while ago, last fall, but we didn't use it very much. But now we're trying to push it more actively and proactively. So we do encourage you to take a look. So I'm going to whonet.org. Here in the top right menu, it says discussion forum. Welcome, and it gives you guidance about the WHONET software and the training materials. If you want to learn more about the discussion forum, there is a Word or a PDF document here called WHONET Discussion Forum Getting Started. I'll start off by clicking there. So I guess it's a PDF document. And so here I'll just focus in on this document. It has 6 sections. What is the WHONET Discussion Forum? How do you register? How do you view and respond to topics? How do you create a new topic? And how you set your notification settings. Do you want to be notified by every single thing that anybody posts? Or do you have certain areas and topics and languages that you might be interested in? Understanding user categories, for example. This is similar to other media platforms. You can be a first-time user, or you've been using it for 100 times or more times. We can give higher levels of commitment in terms of the ability to create your own, your own private discussion groups. So what is the WHONET? Oh, I won't go through the document. You can see this later if you have an interest. And Adam, let's also put that onto the materials for this webinar to have it convenient for you to find. So I'm back on the discussion forum. I'm going to click here on login. I click on login. I am logging in as an administrator, so I have more features than you will see. Not only more features, but anyway, I see more than you do, obviously. I'm one of the administrators. So for example, we have created this one at the bottom. You see the possibility of different languages. Where is the path? Training courses, there it is.
Path is all the way at the bottom, I believe, John.
But thank you. So here's the path one. I won't go into it, but you see there's a lock next to it. It means it's private. Only certain people are allowed into there. So if we see that you have path in your email, we can admit you to that. Most of these are public. So on the right, you can see there was a question about multiple breakpoints: meningitis, non-meningitis, animal breakpoints, fish breakpoints, epidemiological cutoff values. So here you see the discussion points that you can raise. Some of these are more active, but we're going to get more. We'll spend more attention to try to promote its use and to proactively answer questions and encourage you to do so as well. So that's the discussion forum. Close that. I think I'm finished with the WHONET website. Go back to my PowerPoint. There it is. Next, continue with the discussion of breakpoints. Breakpoints is always a difficult matter for IT people. And in WHONET, we've tried to make it as easy as possible and make tools useful for other people. We've been working with breakpoints for over 30 years, but a lot of other hospitals, commercial and non-commercial LIS developers struggle with breakpoints. They either ignore the breakpoints and simply accept R, I, and DES, and they don't try to capture the zone diameter or the MIC value. So they take shortcuts and say, well, is it R, I, and S? Because that's the only thing the doctor wants to see. We don't recommend that. We recommend the zones. We recommend the MIC values for a number of reasons. It's the correct way to do the test, first of all. If you do not record the measurement for disc diffusion, people have a tendency to eyeball the result. They don't take out a ruler. They just look at it and say small is resistant, large is susceptible, and they get the wrong result. It's a shame that the patient is very sick. Someone takes a sample, they send it to the laboratory processes it, finds out the organism, they do the antibiotic testing, and then as the very last step, they take a shortcut and they say, oh, that's resistant, and they don't measure it. The problem is you cannot measure very accurately with your eye, and even if you could, nobody knows all the breakpoints. For ampicillin, imipenem, ceftobiprole, for dogs and cats, and for meningitis and non-meningitis. So you need an IT system to do all of these interpretations. And we have tools such as this test interpretation engine to help LIS developers to do this. So I'll come back to that. Before that, I'll talk about WHONET interpretation categories. All of you are familiar with R, I, and S. This always meant in the past R is resistant, I is intermediate, S is susceptible. But over the years, it's gotten more and more complicated for a number of good reasons. Also some bad reasons. There's some things where EUCAST and CLSI have gone in different directions, making them less comparable. But so R is resistant, there's no question on that. I've been in this field a long time. At the beginning, I did not mean intermediate. When I started, I meant indeterminate. And MS was moderately susceptible. And there wasn't sufficient evidence to make the distinction. So the old I and the MS eventually got merged into intermediate, both for CLSI and EUCAST. But then I think maybe 4 years ago, EUCAST changed it that I in EUCAST no longer means intermediate. It means susceptible with increased exposure. So an I in Europe is indeed susceptible, as long as you use a higher dosage. CLSI introduced a very similar category called susceptible dose dependent. I don't know if there's any real distinction, but basically it's more or less is the same as I. So SDD, the EUCAST I are basically the same concept where the organism is susceptible, but you do need to use a higher dosage. It often means the bacteria is a little bit resistant, but a higher dose is enough for successful treatment. And it's been in EUCAST for a few years, but we finally introduced that into WHONET, including the SDD category this year. Okay, S susceptible, NS is a CLSI category. It means not susceptible. When would that happen? For some organisms like Haemophilus influenza and ceftriaxone, resistance is so extremely rare that CLSI says, I don't know where resistance starts from a clinical perspective. They can say, these are susceptible. I know that these are susceptible. But if there's decreased susceptibility, they don't know whether the patient would fail therapy or not. So the CLSI has decided, let's not call that resistant because we're not sure if the patient would fail therapy. Let's not call it I because we don't know. So in this situation where there is no R category, CLSI says, yes, these are susceptible. These are not clearly susceptible. So they use NS to refer to that. I guess I just want to emphasize a point I make often. People often think that the purpose of these breakpoints, people think that the purpose of CLSI and EUCAST is to find resistance genes. To find resistance. That is not exactly correct. The purpose of CLSI and EUCAST is to predict the patient's clinical outcome. The goal of the lab is not to tell the doctor the bacteria has a gene. The goal of the lab is to tell the doctor this antibiotic should or should not work. And there are many examples where bacteria with a little bit of resistance can effectively be treated with normal doses. This is especially true in urine where a lot of antibiotics are concentrated. So S doesn't mean the bacteria has no resistance mechanism. S means that the patient should respond to standard dosing. And that's why there are different breakpoints for meningitis and non-meningitis. The bacteria does not have a different level of resistance, but the likelihood of a successful or an unsuccessful outcome depends on the disease. For meningitis, the patient is much sicker. The antibiotic must get through the blood-brain barrier. So these are what we call clinical breakpoints. There are human clinical breakpoints, veterinary, animal clinical breakpoints. So this whole top section is about those clinical breakpoints. And that's why susceptible dose dependent means the bacteria is probably a little bit resistant, but higher levels of dose would give you a successful treatment outcome. Finally, we do have wild type, non-wild type. This is the goal, is to find resistance or non-resistance. This is not by clinical breakpoints, but by epidemiological cutoff values. EUCAST is always called this ECOFs. CLSI has often called these ECVs. They mean the same thing, epidemiological cutoff values. In fact, 30 years ago, J.D. Williams helped to innovate this idea. He called it microbiological breakpoints. I kind of like the simplicity of clinical breakpoints versus microbiological breakpoints, but the field has gone towards epidemiological cutoff values. Wild type means it does not have a resistance mechanism phenotypically. Non-wild type means it has some resistance mechanism phenotypically. We don't have the genetics, but the phenotype would suggest the presence or absence. This is especially valuable for things like environmental and food samples or healthy animals, because there is no disease. We're not trying to treat the animal. We're not trying to treat the food product. We're not trying to treat the water, but we are looking for genes. We also have an interpretation question mark. No interpretation possible. For example, CLSI does have breakpoints for ampicillin, but CLSI does not make breakpoints for amoxicillin. So you're supposed to test ampicillin. So if you do put amoxicillin, you'll get a question mark. There are no breakpoints. So these are the standard interpretation categories. These are other, we do get a lot of questions about question marks. What does R question mark mean? What does I question mark mean? And these are only used for MIC values when the value is off scale. There's an excellent example of this with the carbapenems, such as imipenem, and the old CLSI breakpoints. For example, today the breakpoint for imipenem is sensitive less than or equal to 1. So if the MIC is 0.5 or the MIC is 1, we know that the bacteria is susceptible. Or if the laboratory says that the MIC is less than or equal to 1, we do know that's susceptible. But what if the lab says that the MIC is less than or equal to 4? Well, the less than sign would suggest that it's susceptible, but 4 is not necessarily susceptible. So there's a bit of ambiguity here. There's a bit of confusion. So why could this happen? Well, one reason is a typing mistake. Maybe the person meant to write, well, this says 8, I meant to put the number 4. Maybe they meant to write MIC greater than or equal to 4, but they wrote down less than or equal to 4. That's a simple typing mistake. That doesn't happen very often. It would be rare, it would be infrequent. Also, if you download the data from a Vitek or a Phoenix, it will never, there's no typing, you're just downloading it. So there might be a typing mistake. They meant to put less than or equal to 4, but the person typed greater than or equal to 4. That's not common, and it's not going to impact your overall statistics. A much more common issue is when the breakpoints changed. For decades, CLSI had a breakpoint for 4. So the MIC panel often stopped at 4. So for decades, people would have data recorded as MIC less than or equal to 4, and then the breakpoint changed to less than or equal to 1. So what are we supposed to do with that? Well, WHONET says S question mark because the less than or equal to sign suggests that it's susceptible. But the number 4 is not susceptible, so that's why the question mark is there. So one way that this, in practice, what this often means is that S question mark often means susceptible by the older breakpoints. It's probably susceptible by the newer breakpoints, but since we do not know the exact MIC value, we have to put a question mark. So I hope that clarifies why sometimes you will see question marks, S question marks. It means WHONET is probably correct, but not always, because the value doesn't match the breakpoint. It doesn't match the current breakpoint. I'm moving my table because there's sun in my eye. It's the time of the day when I have to move my table a lot. Okay. So let's see. I'm going on to the next slide, and let me demonstrate that. So for example, I'm going to go to WHONET. Just keep track of the time, 7:42. First of all, I'm going to go to the WHO test laboratory, modify laboratory on the right, because I want to see the breakpoints, modify laboratory. I click on antibiotics. The bottom, I click on breakpoints. Just diffusion breakpoints, MIC breakpoints, update breakpoints. So once a year, you can update your breakpoints. In a little bit, we have an old way of doing interpretation and a new way. And I'll come to that in an upcoming slide. I won't get there yet. So if I go to breakpoints, I click on diffusion. You see all the breakpoints, the human, the animal breakpoints. CLSI is definitely not complete, but CLSI does have a very large number of veterinary breakpoints, especially for cats and dogs, also chickens, horses. They also distinguish sometimes between adult horses and young horses. It doesn't have to do with the difference in the bacteria. It does have to do with the difference in the therapeutic outcome. Something that might be Sensitive for an adult horse might be intermediate for a young horse because of the immune system, the kidneys. I'm not exactly sure of all of the reasons, but CLSI does have a lot of these veterinary breakpoints. EUCAST has a small but growing number. The committee is called VetCast. There are only a few. There's only, I think, one on the website for florfenicol. They do have several that are not on the website, but that list is growing. I mentioned an example earlier for Haemophilus. Let me show Haemophilus. And here you see that's sensitive. You see it for what is the first drug, ampicillin. 22 is susceptible, 18 is resistant, 19 to 21 is intermediate. 26 is susceptible. Less than 26, CLSI says we don't have any less than 26. Or if we do, we don't have enough clinical data to know whether or not the patient would respond to therapy. So this would be an example where it would use the NS category. 28 would be susceptible. 15 would be NS, not susceptible. Okay, so I can also, that's Haemophilus influenza. Let me go back to the top. I can search for meningitis, non-meningitis, mastitis, that is for dairy cattle, for milk production. I can look for human breakpoints or animal breakpoints. And you see it's a lot for cats and dogs. We'll leave that screen. WHONET gives you the breakpoints. You don't have to change them. You should not change them. They are correct. Sometimes people either disagree with CLSI or sometimes CLSI is incomplete. We are now working on a project with the American Society of Microbiology on Bordetella pertussis, and there are no breakpoints, and that's one of the reasons for the project. So you can go in and modify and introduce and add your own additional breakpoints. I'm going to click on OK. There's a feature here called Use New Tables. I will talk about that later. OK, cancel, save changes, no. Now going to go to data entry. I'm now inside of data entry. You see all of my antibiotics at the bottom. I'm going to put, for example, I'll put Staphylococcus aureus. You see the list of antibiotics has become less. This is now only the staphylococcal gram-positive antibiotics. Panels is a useful way to filter down to only the relevant antibiotics. And I'm going to put cefoxitin. WHONET does allow you to put RIS. You are allowed to put categories. We do not recommend it. What we do recommend is you put the zone or the MIC. I'm going to put 6 millimeters, 10 millimeters, 20 millimeters, 30 millimeters. And WHONET will tell you the interpretation. Here in the lower right, you do get a message about vancomycin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. That's a medium priority alert. WHONET gives you quality alerts, important species alerts, important resistance alerts. I'm going to show you all of the antibiotics. So here I changed my panel to all antibiotics. And I'm going to go to vancomycin. Vancomycin disc. I'm going to put 6 millimeters. And WHONET says, I don't know what that is. And it says over here, there are no breakpoints. The vancomycin disc is not a reliable test. So, and as you can see, the interpretation here is a question mark, meaning I don't know, there is no, it's not R, it's not I or no S, there is no interpretation possible. I can put 6 millimeters, 30 millimeters, and WHONET says, I'm not going to interpret for you because CLSI says, do not do this test. I'm going to simply type the letter R. WHONET does accept the letter R, and WHONET says VRSA. That's a very important result. That's a high priority alert. High priority alerts have this box that pops up in the middle, and you have to read it and click on OK. Vancomycin-resistant Staph aureus is extremely rare, but it does happen, but it's usually because it's a laboratory mistake. It is not vancomycin-resistant, or it is not Staphylococcus aureus. We've seen that very often, that these what they call vancomycin-resistant Staph aureus turns out to be something else, such as Enterococcus or Pediococcus or yeast or something else. Click on OK. They're showing some of these different categories. The clindamycin, you see S twice. Clindamycin SS. So you see that according to the human breakpoints, 30 is susceptible. And the dog breakpoint it's actually the same in this particular case. Many times it's different, but many times it's the same. So for animals, specifically dogs and skin and soft tissue, this would also be susceptible. Therefore, there are two interpretations. I'm going to go to Streptococcus pneumonia, and I'm going to go to the e-test, lower right, and click on the e-test. And I'm going to type cefotaxime 1. Yeah, 1 is good. So here I see cefotaxime. I put an MIC of 1, and there are 2 interpretations, S and I. And you can see the reason for that here. If your patient has non-meningitis, if your patient has meningitis, then 1 would be intermediate. If the patient doesn't have meningitis, the patient might have an ear infection or pneumonia or sepsis. But somewhere you can treat the patient systemically through the bloodstream. And so in this case, 1 would be susceptible. But if the patient has meningitis, it has to go through the blood-brain barrier, and it will be intermediate in this particular case. So again, there are 2 interpretations. We'll talk about this on the next webinar when we talk about antibiograms and how should you present it. Here you see a few more comments. You should not test beta-lactams by disc diffusion for strep pneumonia, except for the oxacillin disc. WHONET also is giving WHONET also gives some criteria about pneumococcal infections. So these are just copied out of existing documents. Use of cefotaxime for meningitis requires maximal doses. So WHONET does have a pretty comprehensive set of rules for interpretation. These therapy rules, we have not tried to be complete on that. We put some of the more important rules, but in the future, in the next several months, we want to start putting in, if ideally, all of the therapy rules to support clinical reporting better than we currently do. Right now, we've put in the rules especially relevant for analysis and epidemiology, and we put in some of the most important therapy rules for clinical reports. But if CLSI has a rule, EUCAST has a rule, we would like to include all of the rules, even these rules for therapy that are not so relevant for epidemiology. So let's see. So as you can see, cefotaxime, you saw what I had there. Let me go to the vancomycin. There's only a single breakpoint here. Again, there's no resistant breakpoint. It's either sensitive. And CLSI is vancomycin-resistant strep pneumonia. It's so rare that we do not want to say where the category is. If I put here vancomycin 8, WHONET says NS. It's not susceptible. So therefore it gets the NS. Now what happens if I take the MIC less than or equal to 1? That is susceptible. What if I type less than or equal to 4? And WHONET's saying, I'm a bit confused here. Oh, Adam, I believe that should be S question mark. We may want to double check that. So let's see. So that's where the question mark comes from. It says, I'm really not sure what that is supposed to be. For example, if I go to cefotaxime and I put less than or equal to 4, less than or equal to 8, it says we're not sure where it is. Okay, so that's where the question mark comes in. I'm going to click on exit to leave data entry. I'm going to go to data analysis, and I'm going to do analysis type is %R, I, and S. I'm going to Staph organism and Staph aureus. I say OK. Data files, I will choose 1 month of sample data. Begin analysis. I hope all of you are either very familiar with that, so I'm going quickly. The purpose of this, I'm not trying to teach you WHONET. I'm just trying to highlight certain points. So how I got here is obviously in the training materials. What I want to highlight here is it says vancomycin 100% question mark because there are no breakpoints. Whenever it says breakpoints none, it usually means that you are testing something that you shouldn't be testing. That's the most common reason. Because a lot of people, they think they're doing CLSI or EUCAST appropriately, but they are not. That's the main reason. There's another reason, which is a better reason. There are certain drugs like cloxacillin that the doctors want to see the results. So if you test cloxacillin in the laboratory, that's a mistake. There are no QC ranges. There are no interpretive criteria. CLSI and EUCAST are very specific. Test the oxacillin MIC or the oxacillin disc, and then you can predict the cloxacillin. You can predict the flucloxacillin. So sometimes what you will see is a row for the cefoxitin result with the true zone diameter. But you'll see another row for flucloxacillin that they did the interpretation. So it's what we call proxy reporting. I tested cefoxitin, but I want to report to the doctor flucloxacillin. I mentioned an example earlier in CLSI, the laboratory might test ampicillin, but I want to tell the doctor amoxicillin. So I test the ampicillin, that is valid. And then in data entry, I can predict the amoxicillin through, it's a substitute. We're using the class representative. Okay. So I'm showing you in different places. So here I see the category RIS question mark. If I click here at the top, it says show hidden columns. That shows me all of my columns, including it's a penicillin, it's a lincomycin. These hidden columns, they're hiding simply because they take a lot of space. They're not secret. They're just not so interesting. So here you see R and R question mark, I question mark, NS question mark, S question mark. So you see the I category because it has a value. The other ones you don't see because those columns are empty. They're always there, but I'm going to unclick show hidden columns, and now I scroll back, and I only see the columns that have some data. People often ask, what are these numbers off to the right? The numbers off to the right are the disk diffusion measurements or the MIC values, and you see that same information in the graph. So this is the graph for penicillin. So this row that I have just clicked on here, well, the blue row, that's in the table, it says 5.8% is 6 millimeters. And that's what you see here. That's 5.8. So these numbers in red, yellow, and green are the numbers used to make the histogram. Of course, you can copy, paste this to Excel. You can save it as Excel, etc. So I just want to talk a little bit about those question marks and the NSs and some of those other things. Now let me go back to my PowerPoint. And I'm back in the PowerPoint. Let me take a quick look at the time. The time is now, okay, 8 o'clock, good. And now I'm going to the PowerPoint. Interpretation, so we did that demonstration. So now I'll talk about the old way and the new way. I'm calling it the old way, but in fact, we still use it, and we've been using it in WHONET as the default. So even it's the old way, we still use it very actively. And finally, we feel ready to switch to the new way, which is why I wanted to talk about it during this webinar. The old way, I personally wrote myself over 30 years ago. Over 30 years ago, CLSI had one large table with all of the breakpoints, and there was nothing like a species-specific breakpoint, except for Pseudomonas, of all things. So at that time, there was one big table for everything. At that time, EUCAST did not exist. There were French breakpoints and Swedish breakpoints and Norwegian breakpoints, Dutch and German and other breakpoints, and all of them had the same approach. There was one big table, a general table for everything. But then over the years, there were more and more exceptions. There were Pseudomonas and Strep pneumonia and Salmonella. And then with EUCAST never used general breakpoints. When EUCAST was created, everything was specific for Enterobacterales, for Staphylococci, for Enterococcus. In WHONET, we continue to use the general breakpoints as sort of a backup. The problem is we needed the general breakpoints to deal with things like intrinsic resistance. The EUCAST, for example, does not have breakpoints for Pseudomonas for ampicillin. They say do not test it. We're not going to interpret for you when you shouldn't be doing the test. So in WHONET, we were not able to. We needed the general approach, basically to deal with intrinsic resistance. Now we have put in all the intrinsic resistance tables. We no longer need the general breakpoints. That's one difference between the old and the new way. And I've got the sun right in my eye. I'm going to switch to the other side of the table. Okay, it's better. So that's one difference between the old way and the new way. The old way, we made these external tables with breakpoints and the numbers and the ranges and the QC that a lot of our international collaborators use themselves, which was great. However, there was internal rules inside of WHONET, especially for meningitis, non-meningitis, horse, fish. That was more complicated and it didn't fit in the tables. Also, Streptococcus viridans and Streptococcus pneumonia, what breakpoints do you use? Well, if you're dealing with Streptococcus pneumonia, you use the Streptococcus pneumonia breakpoints if they exist. But if there are no Streptococcus pneumonia breakpoints, you use the streptococcal species breakpoints. So it's a bit complicated about which breakpoints apply to different species. And this is what we did forever. until we've offered the new approach for a few years now. I think like 3 years we've offered the new approach. But now we are ready to switch over to it as the default. So now we will have the new approach. So there are no longer general breakpoints, okay? And we can do that because we use the intrinsic resistance tables. So for Pseudomonas and ampicillin, it will say R, not because of the zone diameter, because there are no measurement, there are no criteria. It will say R because of the intrinsic resistance table. Everything is now data-driven. Nothing is inside of WHONET. Everything is saved in these external tables. That has a number of advantages. It's easier for us. You just need somebody who knows Excel to go in and update the numbers on a yearly basis. You don't have to be a programmer. You just need to know the microbiology. That makes it easier for us. But it also makes it easier for other groups. Oops, sorry, went to the wrong slide. MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, they have a mini lab project accompanied by a mini LIMS LIS. So they use the WHONET tables to do interpretations. So does Vietnam, so does Bhutan, so does some other people, where they use the WHONET tables for their own local purposes. The problem is they were doing that before, but they did not have those special complicated rules I described earlier, because that was all inside of WHONET. Now everything is outside. Another advantage of having everything being data-driven is that we can share these discussions with WHO, CLSI, EUCAST, MSF, Welcome, and others. So we now have a subcommittee and a working group to try to explore this idea that 5, 10, 20 years from now, this doesn't have to be a WHONET responsibility, that EUCAST and CLSI can update the tables and put them on the website. So we're exploring a project where they can use WHONET to begin with to pilot the concept, test out the ideas, refine it, improve it. We want to add in those therapy rules that I mentioned. And then eventually, these could be hosted on their website. EUCAST has always been completely on board of this, highly supportive, because all of their materials are free. They do distribute the breakpoints for free in PDF and Excel, but not in a format useful for data managers. CLSI has also been very supportive. Their documents are commercial, but increasingly a lot of their documents their PDF documents can be read online. So we're not sure exactly what CLSI would do in the future regarding these kinds of files, but at least they're very happy to work with us to develop the concept and these tables. So with WHONET, if you update to WHONET 2024, and you create a new configuration, we'll start you off with the new approach. But it won't change anything you've done already. If you've been using it the old way, it's going to continue with the old way. We do not want to change interpretations without you knowing about it. So just continue to use the old way, and you can switch to the new way whenever you would like. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, good. Okay, open up WHONET. And I still have WHONET open here, exit out of data analysis. You can go to the new approach temporarily here inside of analysis, here inside of WHONET. I do that here under analysis type. Here at the bottom, it says use new WHONET breakpoint tables. I can configure, you don't have to configure them, but WHONET you can turn off, I don't want the animal breakpoints, I don't want this. So you can say which rules you want and you don't want. You can also prioritize. For example, for many years, if there was for purposes of public health surveillance, EARSnet just wants to do 1%. They don't, for penicillin, pneumonia, they don't want to present both meningitis interpretation statistics and non-meningitis statistics. So for many years, they prioritized the meningitis ones. So if I click on meningitis and I move up, if there is a meningitis breakpoint, that will take priority over the non-meningitis breakpoint if you have to pick one. For most analyses, WHONET will show you multiple interpretations. You saw that in data entry with SS, SI, the %RS analysis. You saw the dog breakpoints, the human breakpoints in different rows. But for purposes of antibiograms, for personal reasons of national statistics, such as EARSnet, you often have to choose one. So for many years, EARSnet chose the meningitis breakpoints. And then for very good reasons 20 years ago. Now for different very good reasons, they now want to prioritize the non-meningitis. So take the non-meningitis breakpoints. One of the reasons for that is non-meningitis does distinguish between R and I and S. And it doesn't, and meningitis doesn't do that. It's either resistant or it's susceptible. So the non-meningitis breakpoints give you better epidemiology. So there was a very good reason for the change. So we do have our defaults. We do have what we would recommend, but you can come in and change those things. So if I do it here, it will simply use the new breakpoint tables now. But as soon as I leave data analysis and I go back in again, and I go here, it's not using the new breakpoints. It's continuing with the old way. So this could be a good way for you to pilot out what is the similarities and differences once you switch from the old to the new way. Most things should be exactly the same. Other way to change it permanently is File, Modify Laboratory. I just go to the configuration area. I click on Antibiotics. I click on Breakpoints. And I click on Use the new interpretation tables. And I get the same options for configuration. Maybe I only want to see the animal breakpoints and I don't want to see the others. Or maybe if I'm working with food isolates and water isolates, maybe I only want to see the epidemiological cutoff values. And I'm going to click on OK. Adam, let's just change ECOF to epidemiological cutoff value, just so not everyone may not. And then we could put ECOF in parentheses. Click on OK.
Sure.
OK, good. And I'm going to click out of that. And I think that's all I have to say about. I guess I have one more thing to say. I'm going to go to. I have two more things to say. I am now in the WHONET folder. Most of you never go here. It's where the software is. So the software, here's WHONET.exe. That's the WHONET software. Backlink.exe. That's the backlink software. There is one folder here called Codes and one folder here called Resources. I'm going to go to the one called Codes. So here you can see is the list of the WHONET countries, the list of data fields, the list of MIC panels, the list of salmonella and other serotypes. And one of them, let's see. If I go to resources, it has similar ones. And so here you see the antibiotics table. So it's a simple text file. You can load this in Excel. And there's one called Breakpoint. So all of our breakpoints are inside of this file. I'm going to copy and paste that to Excel. Copy, paste. I go to Excel. So as you can see, these are the CLSI and the EUCAST breakpoints going back to 2012. So allowing you to do the old breakpoints and the new breakpoints. That's a new feature from a few years ago, where you can analyze data with today's breakpoints, or you can reanalyze the data from a few years ago if you want to see the impacts. So here are the different categories, the ECOFs, the S's, the R's, the SDDs. So I'm going to close that. But if you have computer programmers responsible for your LISs, these tables can be very useful to you. Same thing for the organisms. I'm going to open that in Excel. Well, let's see, copy, paste, and let me go to Excel. So here are all of the WHONET organisms, and they've been categorized as, non-fermenters and genus and the species and the group and all of that. So between this table and the breakpoints table, that's how we do the breakpoint interpretations. In addition, there's another table somewhere with the QC ranges. So a normal WHONET user has no need to know any of this. But if you are working with an IT company, if you work with an IT company, these tables might allow them to start doing measurements in a consistent way. It's easier for them because we're doing the table management for them. It's more reliable and they can maintain it from year to year. Okay, good. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, moving on to WHO GLASS. When many people think, so WHO GLASS is the WHO Global Antimicrobial Resistance and Use Surveillance System. was created, I'm not certain, around 2015, live 2015, maybe 2016. And it started with this first option called GLASS-AMR. So many of you would be familiar with GLASS-AMR. But over the years, WHO has expanded the number of modules. So this is copied from the WHO GLASS website. They have what they refer to as routine surveillance, focused surveillance, surveys and studies. The two that they recommend for all countries are the first two, GLASS-AMR and GLASS-AMC, that's antimicrobial consumption. Once a year, they are national aggregate statistics for key drug-bug specimen combinations for AMR, and then, of course, AMC, different, the antimicrobial use national statistics. This is not patient level, it's not animal level, it is not zone diameter level, it is simply, and it's not laboratory level. It is, if you have a country with 50 labs, you average them all together, and that gets submitted to Geneva once a year. So that's GLASS-AMR. On one of the slides I have, I believe there were 137 countries enrolled in GLASS-AMR, of which 91 submitted AMR data, something like that. And that's increasing every year. But those are not the only GLASS modules. There's also the GLASS-EAR, that is emerging antimicrobial resistance. There is an IT platform for that. You can report individual results. You can report resistance events like an outbreak. So it's more anecdotal. You can develop national and regional criteria for what you may want to report to EAR. After several years of experience, there was a few months ago, a review and evaluation of the current experience with the idea of making recommendations for GLASS-EAR version 2.0. So that does not exist yet. They haven't changed it. The platform is the same, but just so that you know about it for reporting important resistance events, either individual isolates or events such as an outbreak of a multi-resistant strain. In WHONET, we support the ones in green. This one called GLASS-FUNGI, specifically that is candidemia, Candida or related things that used to be Candida in blood. That's individual reporting. I imagine you could do it throughout the year. If you have 5 patients with Candida albicans in blood, they get uploaded, whenever you want, I would imagine. If I'm saying something incorrect, then of course someone from WHO could comment in the chat and they could add comments later. But it's individual reporting. So it's the zones, the MIC, the dates, no patient name, encrypted patient IDs. So that's individual level reporting, which gives WHO a lot more flexibility in data analysis and reviewing emerging resistance, dealing with changing breakpoints. I started to mention earlier why we recommend zones and MICs. The reason I focused on is it's the correct way to get the correct response. Other reasons is you need them to do meningitis, non-meningitis, cats, dogs, because they all have different interpretations depending on the number. And it's also another reason for the measurements is so that you compare your old data and your new data. When the breakpoints change, you still want to be able to compare with the old data if you can. EGASP is for the Enhanced Gonococcal Antimicrobial Susceptibility Program. So that is for gonorrhea. They have a lot of clinical data about risk factors and outcomes and treatments. One Health, there's a One Health module called the ESBL producing Escherichia coli TriCycle project. So all of those are modules within WHONET, both for data entry and for data export. There's another one that I wasn't sure if it's live yet called GLASS-Bacteria. I'm not sure that's the correct name of it. WHO did confirm that, yes, it is live. It is on the IT platform. It does not yet appear on the GLASS webpage. So let me just go to the GLASS webpage since I've mentioned it. So if you just do a web search for WHO GLASS, it's the first link that comes up. What I copied here is this table. Burden is here twice. That's a mistake. It's the same link, so Burden just needs to be there once. So if I click on GLASS-FUNGI, it brings me to the reporting protocol. There it is. GLASS-FUNGI, AMR surveillance of invasive fungal events. Why are we doing this? Why is this important? And this is from 2019, the early implementation protocol for inclusion of Candida species. So if you are interested in EGASP, I am now going back and I'm clicking on EGASP. enhanced gonorrhea surveillance, and again, the why and the Global Action Plan. 2012 is not the most up-to-date document. I would recommend WHO puts a more recent document about the data management for AMR surveillance for the gonorrhea. One Health. I imagine, so I'm a member of the WHO, I was a member of the WHO AGISAR group, Advisory Group on Integrated Surveillance, that's been reconstituted as the quadripartite group on integrated surveillance. And we had a call the other day, we're developing protocols for how do you do surveillance, integrated surveillance from One Health perspective. How do you do it in healthy animals and diseased animals, and how do you compare across sectors? And the pure animal stuff, I'll cover that later when we talk about FAO. But within WHO, there's one specific project called the ESBL E. coli TriCycle project, and there is some information on that here. I would imagine, as the quadripartite makes more recommendation, that this menu of possible One Health options will expand. It might be hosted by WHO, by FAO, the UN Environmental Program as well. But this is what WHO has at the present time for One Health. They have the E. coli TriCycle project. So we're going to close out of that website. I'm good. I'm going to, okay. The next slide is the GLASS modules demonstration. Good. So now let me go to WHONET. File. When you open WHONET, you come to the main screen here. Moving my chair again. It's a bad time of day with the moving around. Okay. Back a little bit to stay in the shade. Basically, there's no light in my eye, but there's light on my screen, and I can't read my screen because it's in direct sunlight. But now I'm back in the shade again. So here you see the different configurations I have on my computer. We give everyone this one called the WHO Test Laboratory. Actually, we've recently renamed that. I haven't updated my WHONET. This will no longer be called the WHO Test Laboratory. It will be called the WHONET Test Laboratory, because we're trying to move away from this being seen as purely WHO. We are very active with FAO on the food and animal side. The World Organization for Animal Health has taken the lead in use and consumption. FAO has taken the lead in resistance in the food and animal sector, and the UN Environmental Program and WHO will be collaborating on the E. coli and the water sampling that the TriCycle project would cover. A simple thing that we can do is no longer call this WHO Test Laboratory, but call it WHONET Test Laboratory. And I forgot to update my WHONET before this presentation. We're going to continue to call the software WHONET because otherwise it would cause a lot of confusion. But we have thought about changing to another name to be more comprehensive. I don't want to call it One Health Net, but AMR Net, but some of these names already exist, like MicroNet. Some of these already are existing projects. So because we do want to recognize that WHONET is not only for the human health sector and emphasize the links from a One Health perspective. Okay, so this, all of you get the WHO Test Laboratory. It is part of our teaching materials. I'm going to click on cancel here. If you want to make a new laboratory in WHONET from the beginning, you could create here a new laboratory. That's the normal way. You put in your country, human, animal, food, sample locations, antibiotics, etc. Clicking on new laboratory. But there's a shortcut for several projects. If I click on cancel, and if I click on file, we have these options: create a new EARSnet laboratory for Europe, new WHONET Argentina, new GLASS-AMR, GLASS-FUNGI, GLASS-EGASP for those different projects that I mentioned. PAHO has a blood culture study which covers bacteria and fungi. We did a special one for Vietnam animal health. We did FAO. We did FAO. The World Health Organization divides the world into 6 regions. FAO divides the world into 5 regions. One of those regions is called RAP, Region of Asia Pacific. The region of Asia Pacific has been very active in resistance for many, many years. So these have to do with the RAP. And Adam, let's relabel that to emphasize that this is not the global FAO, this is the regional FAO. And then there's InFARM, which is global. That's led out of Geneva. That's from headquarters. This ASM project that I mentioned. So for example, that's right, I was talking about GLASS. So I can go to GLASS-AMR, new laboratory. Well, I'll show the gonorrhea one just to show you something different that many of you have not seen before. If I go to EGASP, I click on new laboratory. WHONET will ask me the country. I will say United States because I'm here, and I'll say EGASP demo. I'll call this EGASP or eDemo. I'll call it EGASP. Human, yes, this is a human disease. I will click on OK. CLSI or EUCAST, it's CLSI that I would like to show. It only asked me one question. For other projects like FAO, it will ask me more questions. And I will show an example of that. Do you want to review the laboratory configuration now? I won't. I'll click on no, and I'll go directly to data entry. So when I click on EGASP, you see there are a lot of questions. Some of these are specifically about the patient's country of birth, country's gender identity. So beyond male, female, there are other categories. Discharge from urethra, vagina, pain, treatment number 1, treatment number 2, risk factors and previous antibiotic use. So this is specific, and as you can see, this is a lot of questions. But keep in mind, gonorrhea is not a high volume organism. So this is a very valuable set of questions for sentinel sites to be collecting to help guide the understanding of AMR epidemiology to help treatment guidelines and understanding of risk factors. So there's a very large number of questions, part of the EGASP protocol, and it's all predefined. I'm going to click on exit. Do you want to save this isolate? No, I do not. So I demonstrated one. Oh, and and that's how you can enter data. Let me demonstrate now one of the exports. That's data entry for one of the GLASS modules. I'll now go to data entry. There's an option here called combine, export, or encrypt data. So now I will show you how to export data to GLASS. This was the subject of a full webinar last September, but I'll just show a little bit of it here. Combine, export, or encrypt data. I can say I don't want to export from WHONET to WHONET. I can do AMR fungi. Individual is the one that we refer to as glass bacteria. I just need to get the final wording from WHO and wait for it to appear on the website. So I want to show the GLASS-AMR export. I'm going to say that the data that I will demonstrate are from the year 2000. It will create a % resistant intermediate susceptible file for the antibiotic results. It will include a sample file. WHO wants everybody to submit the RIS antibiotic results. They don't want everybody to submit the sample results. More specifically, the sample file is not exactly about antimicrobial resistance. It's more about volume of testing and diagnostic stewardship. How many blood cultures did you do? How many sputums did you do? How many male? How many female? How many young? How many medium age? How many older? So, and to do that, you need the negatives. And a lot of laboratory surveillance systems do not include the negatives, the no gross, the normal flora, the contaminated samples. So if you have the antibiotic results, definitely submit the antibiotic file, the RIS file. WHO is requesting you submit the sample file if you can provide the negatives, because then they can calculate things like % positive, % negative. They can calculate how many blood cultures did you do, and if we can come up with a meaningful denominator, how many blood cultures are done per 100 beds or 1,000 patient days or national population. So the RIS files for antibiotic statistics, the samples file needs to know how many bloods did you do, and that does need the negatives. So if you don't include the negatives, don't include the sample file. And if you do, WHO will tell you that they're looking for the negatives. Okay, good. So I just say 2000, I don't have to export everything. For example, if I am working in the routine bacteriology department, I don't want to export the gonorrhea. That's a different department. So you can decide which organisms and which specimen types different groups should submit. Or it's possible that your blood data would be ready, but the genital data might not be ready because you're doing MIC testing. I'm going to say I need to choose my data files. I click on data files. I clicked on.
John?
Yes?
Just one moment. You might want to switch back to the normal test configuration. I don't think EGASP has the right set of drugs.
Thank you for that reminder. I just noticed that when it was asking me about the wrong file. Thank you. That's exactly correct. So now I'm not going to demonstrate with the EGASP configuration. I'm going to open the WHO test laboratory. and I'm going to go to data entry, combine or export, and I'm going to export WHO GLASS-AMR for data from the year 2000. Now, when I click on data files, I'm going to choose the 1 month of human health data. Okay, click on begin analysis. In the lower left, you can see it's exporting the blood and the urine and the samples and the RAS. It's finished. Show the validation form. Yes, I do want to see that. I can see all of my statistics. To make this easier to understand, let me just look at the E. coli. So now I see the E. coli statistics for blood, lower respiratory, and urine. And maybe I only want to see the urine. So now I just see the urine statistics. And on the right, I see my %R, my %I, and my %S. And this was covered in the webinar last September, but just as a little bit of a reminder that we spent a lot of time this year on updating from GLASS 1.0 to 2.0, but also the gonorrhea project, the fungal project, the bacterial project. And I can copy paste that to Excel. So I'm going to click out of exit from there. So you've seen how to enter data into different GLASS modules. Last September, I focused on the GLASS-AMR. Today, you saw also the gonorrhea. If I want to export to these other ones, you export to EGASP, export to fungi in the same way I just did for the gonorrhea, for the AMR. I'm going to exit out of WHONET here. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And finally, some of the One Health features. I mentioned, so let me go to the next one. So FAO InFARM, I'm going to go to the next slide to go historically. So FAO Region of Asia Pacific started much earlier in collaboration with headquarters, but FAO Asia Pacific started very early coming up with recommended protocols for their region. On the website, they describe 5: monitoring and surveillance of resistance in healthy animals, diseased livestock and poultry, aquaculture, surveillance in the animal environment, the farms, etc., monitoring antimicrobial use at the farm level. This other one, I don't know if it's finalized, I don't know if it's in draft, but they are also making one on monitoring of antimicrobial residues in food. That's not immediately relevant for studies of resistance, but it's indirectly relevant how much antibiotic is there in food. Of course, we study residues in food, of course, from the perspective of safety, especially for people who have allergies. You don't want to give an animal penicillin and then the person eats the food and gets a penicillin allergy. So FAO Region of Asia Pacific, in strong collaboration with HQ, has made these protocols for their region. Based on the Region of Asia Pacific experience, developed this concept of InFARM. InFARM is the International FAO Resistance Monitoring System, and the link is there. And they do give you 2 options for reporting, Model A and Model B. Model A is what they recommend. That's isolate level reporting, similar to what WHO is doing for candidemia and that the new bacterial one. You report the MICs, you report the dates, you report the locations. You don't report the names. You don't report anything confidential. The name of the animal, or in this case, you could also confidentialize the name of the farm if you would like to do that. So Model A is isolate level reporting. I presume that you could do that data submission throughout the year if you would like. Model B is aggregate reporting once a year, similar to the GLASS-AMR. They prefer Model A because it gives them more flexibility of reanalyzing data, using the zones, using the clinical breakpoints, using the veterinary breakpoints, using the epidemiological cutoff values. But they also recognize the degree of confidentiality. So they do respect that. So the countries have the option of doing Model B. I'll tell you my % resistance. I'll tell you how many we did, but I don't want to give you that level of isolate level reporting. So you either do Model A reporting or Model B reporting. I mentioned I'm traveling a lot in July. So I've got 9 continents. No, I've got 9 countries in 5 continents in 1 month. So there's a training course for Colombia. So hopefully some people on this course will be invited to some of these. The invitations I think the first two have gone out. The thirds, I don't know if they've gone out yet. So for the Americas, we have a training course next week in Bogota, Colombia, 2 weeks later in Zambia, and 2 weeks, and the following week in Thailand. This is also going to be a month for us to refine and improve some of these elements regarding the demonstrations and InFARM and the databases. So by the end of the month, we have all these materials, but this is going to be the first time where for a full month, our focus will be on the food and animal aspects. For people on this call, just to let you know, I plan to visit Colombia round trip. Following that, it will be Zimbabwe, Zambia, Eswatini, and Malawi. So I'm coordinating with the Fleming Fund country grant coordinators those visits. Following that, it will be Thailand, Indonesia, and Laos. So you can be in touch with your country coordinators about those visits. So it's not only human, but the dates are surrounding the FAO workshops. So I already mentioned this slide. There is a new initiative that's getting off the ground called GISA. For many years, this was described as TISA for the tripartite integrated surveillance system for antimicrobial resistance. The tripartite was WHO, FAO, and what was known as OIE. OIE has now been renamed to the World Organization for Animal Health. Well, in fact, the name was World Organization for Animal Health, but they have changed from OIE to WOAH. So I will call that WOA, World Organization for Animal Health. But in light of a One Health approach, we have a greater appreciation of the environmental aspect. So the UN Environmental Program has been invited. Therefore, this is now a quadripartite. So GISA was TISA, but it's the Global Integrated Surveillance System. And this is from a February 2024 progress report. I'll just read parts of it. The integrated surveillance of AMR in use, an expert technical group of which I'm a member, was met in 2022 to develop an action plan, including a quadripartite guide on integrated surveillance, which is the subject of a lot of calls, including one we had earlier this week. And that is near finalization, hopefully before, it's getting to the point where it's almost ready for the final edits and the proofs. Not quite there, but after this round of edits, it will go for the final rounds of edits and approvals and clearance within those 4 respective organizations. So GISA, now in development, the IT platform aims to serve as a repository pooling data across sectors by the quadripartite organizations. I've been told that the IT platform does exist. It's not live, but they are working on it. The idea is not that they're not going to collect their own data. They will get data from WHO GLASS. 137 countries are enrolled, and 91 of them currently submit AMR data. The FAO InFARM is going live now. It better be ready by next week because it's part of the agenda. WOA, FAO focuses on the resistance aspect. WOA focuses on the use aspect. So they have a database called ANIMUSE, Animal Antimicrobial Use. And there's also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Right now, there are 2 SDGs. There are 2 Sustainable Development Goals related to resistance. Both of those are drawn out of GLASS statistics. They're both human health oriented. One is MRSA in blood, and the other is 3rd-generation cephalosporin resistant E. coli in blood. Some other comments from regarding the upcoming the United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting taking place in September. So WHO GLASS and FAO and ANIMUSE have enabled AMR surveillance in agri-food systems and antimicrobial use in animals. The sentence did not include WHO GLASS. That was in a previous long paragraph. So I just combined those 2 paragraphs together. And are supporting the development of an integrated AMR system called GISA. The inclusion of new AMR indicators in the SDG monitoring framework and the publication of the research agenda for AMR and the WHO Global Research Agenda are also important steps. Finally, I do want to mention in this area about SILAB. SILAB is a widely used veterinary laboratory information system, especially utilized in Africa. So any veterinary groups on this call in Africa probably have heard of SILAB. They're now piloting it in some Asian countries. So this is the homepage for SILAB. SILAB is Italian, Sistema di Laboratorio, laboratory system. It has been developed by IZS, one of the public animal health institutes of the country. And this is all being done in close collaboration with FAO. So here you see the countries where it has been introduced or being introduced. In Asia, they are now piloting, I believe, in Bangladesh, Laos, and Cambodia. So on the human side, there's such a diversity of LISs. On the animal side, there's either nothing, there's Excel, or they use one of the human health systems, or SILAB, which has been an important, valuable standardization tool across these countries. So this will be part of the training for Africa coming up. So this is their homepage. If I look for SILAB, there is also a 2019 publication about SILAB for Africa, but also for Asia now. So if you'd like to learn more about SILAB, you can look there. We work closely with the developers at making sure the interface is smooth. Right now it's a manual interface, but we're trying to work on an automated interface so that you wouldn't have to do anything. It should automatically go to WHONET for analysis. So we're working with the developers on that. Demonstration, I think that, yeah, and this is the last slide. So demonstration of some of the One Health features. And then I'll be ready for the questions. So if you have questions, please start adding them or continue adding them to the chat. So you've already seen some of them. For example, I'm going to click here on cancel on the main screen because I want to go to file, and I'll show this one called FAO Animal Health, and this is specifically for region of Asia Pacific. So when I go to this one, I'll again put United States. And I'll say FAO wrap demo, and let me just call this FAO Human Animal Food Environment. That's question 1. Okay. Are you looking for healthy animals or diseased or the aquatic animals? And you say which ones you want. So here there's a greater series of questions. I click on OK. FAO has worked closely with the company that makes the SensiTiter MIC panels. They're so specialized, which antibiotics and which dilutions. So they have had a collaboration for many years with the producers of SensiTiter panels to create customized panels. These panels were customized for healthy animals. I don't know exactly, I might make some mistakes here, but I think ECA refers to E. coli and Acinetobacter maybe. EN maybe is the Enterococcus, this one is the Campylobacter. Diseased animals, BOPO, this is for bovine and porcine. In other words, cattle and swine, pigs. Avian panel, CMV, I don't know what that one is. And then there's a special panel for aquatic. So you can check off which panels you are using for your project. And then WHONET already knows which antibiotics and which dilutions are on each panel. I click OK. CLSI or EUCAST, this time I will say EUCAST. I'll say OK. Minimal configuration or full configuration. I'm just going to do the minimal configuration because even the minimal configuration has a large number of questions. I'm going to say OK. Finished. Let me go to data entry. So this is for FAO Region Pacific. They have questions like, what is the funding source? This is related to, is it passive surveillance or active surveillance? Health status. As you can see on the right, there's diseased, healthy, dead, other, animal species. You see the animal species on the right. The animal use for dairy, for milk, for meat, for eggs. Market category, domestic, for export, imported. What is the suspected disease? That's only relevant, obviously, for the diseased animals. The location, the region, the city, the district. We have customized that for Vietnam, so it pre-populates it with the Vietnam regions and the Vietnam districts. The water type, the location type, the number of the farm type. So you see backyard farm, free-range farm, poultry sector 1. These have very specific meanings within the agri-food industry. I don't know what they mean. I'm kind of guessing it's sort of like small, big, medium, large, something like that. Commercial, non-commercial. You see they have storage location. What freezer is it in? What storage number? So these are customized questions for the project. Of course, you can add additional questions if you would like. You can remove questions that are not needed. For example, FAO might be request some of these things, but if you don't have it, you can just remove the question if you don't have it. Going to exit out of that. So that's one example of customization with regard to data entry. We have these predefined protocols. If I go to data analysis and I go to go to data analysis. If I go to analysis type, I showed an example earlier using percent resistance. Here I'm going to show all gram-negative organisms. I'm going to go back to analysis type, and I'm going to ask for a summary. I don't want the details, I just want the summary. Okay. Data files, oh, I'm in the wrong configuration again. File open. I chose this one called FAO wrap that I just created for you as a demonstration. It doesn't have any data. Let me go back to the WHONET test laboratory. Data analysis. Analysis type is RAS summary. Organisms will be all gram-negative organisms. The data file will be this One Health database. This One Health database has 100 human, 100 animal, 100 food, and 100 environmental samples. The human, animal, and food projects came from an old project, from the same area, funded by the WHO AGISAR initiative. So the human, animal, and food samples come from the same project. The environmental samples, the water samples, I added in from a different TriCycle project. It doesn't really matter, but just to tell you where the data came from. 3 of those, the human, animal, food, came from the same project, and the water samples I got later from a different TriCycle project. Of course, we changed the names of the dates. We move things around. It's not the original data for confidentiality purposes. Only we just took the first 100. We're not trying to do a research project here. We're just trying to give you tools to learn the software. I'm going to click on Begin Analysis. So before I showed you an example with the human health database, this is the One Health database. So you can see it has Campylobacter, E. coli, and Salmonella. So for example, if I look at something like ciprofloxacin, let's see, you see the percent susceptibility. If I click on Campylobacter, these are the drugs that were tested. E. coli, these are the drugs that were tested. Relatively susceptible to a few antibiotics, highly resistant to some other antibiotics. Continue. Or I can also choose, for example, here, I just want to see E. coli. When I choose E. coli, I only see one row for E. coli. But if I go to analysis type, there's an option here on the right called rows for stratification. It goes by organism, but I can also, for example, go by origin. So now I see 4 rows. I see there were 24. You see it says origin. A is animal, E is environmental, F is food, and human, H is human. So all of the environmental are E. coli. It's from the TriCycle project. There were 24 E. coli from animals, 19 from food, and 25 from humans. Continue. So we're trying to make sure our training materials cover the human and the animal side. I showed you that WHONET course. Installation, data entry, configuration, cover all human, animal, food, environmental together. We just need 1 extra slide, 2 extra slides, a few extra slides, a few extra comments. The data analysis focuses on human health. So for FAO, I'll redo those modules and use the animal. I'll use this data file instead as an example. So they get animal health examples instead of human animal examples. So let's see if I go to data export. You can see I can export to FAO InFARM option A for individual reporting, or option B for aggregate reporting. I won't bother demonstrating it because you already saw something very similar with the GLASS. So you've seen how WHONET has a sample database for food and animals. It has templates for data entry. You can integrate into a data analysis, and you can export to this FAO InFARM stuff. We don't export to the FAO wrap ones because they just use the WHONET file. People submit their WHONET files directly, so there is no need to do a data export. Same thing for TriCycle. There is no TriCycle format different from WHONET. If you have E. coli in your WHONET in TriCycle, you can just send that to WHO. I don't know the protocol for how you do that, if it's through the GLASS website or somewhere else. Okay, good. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Anything else? I might have other things to think about, but this is a good time to go to the questions. So Adam, if you can maybe guide me as to where I should start. Now, you can see the sun right behind me now. I'm going to find out what I should have done a while ago. I'm going to get comfortable and sit on the couch. Okay. Adam, where should I start?
I think there's only one outstanding question, perhaps at the bottom, about the tigacycline FDA breakpoint.
Okay, that's an excellent question, and Adam and I have discussed it. That's one of the things that we had a lot of small things we wanted to do before releasing WHONET 2024, but we also wanted to release it before the end of the first half of the year. This is one of those pending issues. So people think in the United States we use CLSI. We sort of do, but we also have FDA breakpoints, and the machines go by FDA breakpoints. I'm going to go to the FDA website. So if FDA STIC is susceptibility test interpretive criteria. So unfortunately, they're not the same breakpoints. They overlap, they're similar, many times they're the same, sometimes they're different. And WHONET does not offer the FDA breakpoints, so we would eventually love to include the entire list of FDA so that people can choose between CLSI and FDA. We haven't done that yet. There are 5 drugs that do have FDA breakpoints that do not have CLSI breakpoints. And one of those 5 drugs is tigacycline. Here you see, for example, antibacterial criteria, antifungal criteria. So there's a very convenient table here. I do have to say that 20 years ago, it was even before that, 15 years ago, it was very hard to find the FDA breakpoints. You had to go to the package insert. Yes, Adam?
Could you share your screen again, John?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Sorry. Share screen. So what I did is I went to Google. And I did a search for FDA STIC, S-T-I-C. I go to that first link. And here you can see there are antibacterial STICs and antifungal STICs. STIC is their susceptibility test interpretive criteria. And if I go down to the antibacterial criteria, you see a very nice table. I'm still not completely happy with it, but it's a big step ahead. 15 years ago, it was very hard to find the FDA breakpoints. You had to go to the package insert separately for each drug. Over time, they made it easier, so all of the information is here. For example, amikacin by injection, oral. Does it have a STIC for CLSI? Yes, it does. Does it have anything different from CLSI? Yes, it does. What we like to see here is yes and no. Well, let me choose a better example. Ampicillin, yes and no. So yes, there are CLSI criteria, and no, there are no differences for FDA. So for ampicillin and for several of these others, yes, no, the CLSI and FDA completely agree. There are other cases like amikacin where there are official CLSI breakpoints, but the FDA does not completely accept them. And oftentimes they're out of sync. They eventually catch up, but not always. Sometimes they have a difference of opinion. FDA is a US governmental agency. CLSI is a professional collaboration between the US government, clinical societies and microbiology professionals, and the industry, diagnostic manufacturers and the pharmaceutical manufacturers. And because of the history and because of these things, they're not always in sync and they don't always come to the same agreement. So as you can see, these are the FDA breakpoints, and they'll often highlight, right. So for Acinetobacter, they agree with CLSI. Here they agree with CLSI. Here, these are the differences. So we would eventually love to get all of that into WHONET, but no one's really asked for it. It's not a priority. If people don't ask for it, it stays on our list, but it doesn't move up on the list. It's in our plan for someday when somebody considers it to be a priority. However, it asked me if I want to give feedback. And I said, yes, please make a table. Because right now it's a mixture of footnotes and comments. There's not a table of FDA breakpoints. It's this series of tables with comments. So my comment to them is please make this something similar to EUCAST or CLSI, and then it would be easier for us to work with. That's my comment for them. So yes, no is what we like. That means they agree with CLSI. Yes means they usually agree with CLSI for most things, but not for everything. But 5 of these are no yes. And let me find tigacycline. Tigecycline is the only famous one. The other ones I don't expect people are going to be asking about. So no, there are no CLSI breakpoints, but yes, there are FDA breakpoints. Tigecycline, and here you see what they are. So these are the official breakpoints, and as you can see, there is no resistant breakpoint. There is a susceptible breakpoint. It's for that same reason that I described earlier. Resistant isolates are so rare that CLSI says, I don't feel comfortable saying that there are, or they might be I. They might indeed be S in the sense that the patient might get better. So this is a case where like 0.5 is sensitive, 0.25 is sensitive, 0.125 is sensitive. 1 might be sensitive, but we don't have enough clinical data. Therefore, they use this category of NS. So, and that's one thing I wanted to have done before the end of June, but we ran out of time. I wanted to have the webinar. So by the end of July, Adam, as we've discussed many times, there are the 5 drugs that have FDA breakpoints that do not have CLSI breakpoints. So we're just going to copy those in, and we'll just put a little asterisk somewhere that this is not an official CLSI breakpoint. It is actually an official FDA breakpoint. There are other examples like Bordetella pertussis. We do have unofficial breakpoints. They're unofficial breakpoints that we use for the project. They were recommended by the CDC. So I don't want to call them official breakpoints, but they are official, unofficial breakpoints. Also for the US NARMS project for enteric pathogens, the Canadian CPARS initiative, the Europeans for Salmonella, there are certain important drugs that no longer have CLSI breakpoints. Streptomycin might be one of them. It's an important drug for epidemiology, but it's not an important drug for treatment. So there are some examples where there are official or semi-official breakpoints that do not come from CLSI or FDA or EUCAST. And we'd like to start introducing this concept of semi-official breakpoints. I didn't read the question about the tigecycline, but Adam, I hope that I covered the answer. Okay, does WHONET have any system to add tigecycline? Because the US FDA has breakpoints, as used, the CLSI EUCAST are available. So before the end of July, for those 5 drugs that FDA has breakpoints, but CLSI does not, we'll just put them as CLSI breakpoints, but with a little footnote that they're not official CLSI breakpoints. The other thing that you can do, the other thing people have been doing, is I showed you can edit the WHONET breakpoint, so people will go into that table and they'll just instead say, the tigecycline breakpoints are what we have. We will come up with the solution for tigecycline soon, but this is true for anything else. If you have other drugs that are too new, that don't have breakpoints, you can add and modify your rules yourself. Okay, Adam, other questions or comments, or?
How about this one from Sonia B?
Okay, I'll read that. Thank you for a presentation, useful emphases. Can you talk a little about WHONET and the module for GLASS One Health? Sure. And Adam, again, this is one thing that we wanted to put in for this month. It didn't quite make it, but it's easy to do. Let's see. WHONET, no, where would I put that? And if I go to WHO, and I go to WHO headquarters, HQ, and I go to WHO GLASS, and I go to, I also saw here E. coli TriCycle. Whoops, went to the wrong folder. E. coli TriCycle. Oops. E. coli TriCycle. C drive, WHONET, paste. Okay. Now it's here on the list. So ESBL E. coli TriCycle. So Adam, we discussed this in the context of the pertussis one. We added the pertussis. We want to add this as well. So people doing the TriCycle, WHO sends them this file, or we send them this file for the E. coli TriCycle project. So I will now go to data entry, open laboratory. Yes, update the break. Oh, saying, well, okay, all of you will see this question. There are new breakpoints available for 2024. Would you like to update to the new breakpoints now? I can say yes, or I can say no, or I can say ask me later. I'm in the middle of a demonstration. I don't want to update the breakpoints right now. I'll say ask me in 1 month, or I can say no, ask me in 1 month, and it's going to ask me later. I can, if I don't want to wait a month, I can go to File, Modify Laboratory, Antibiotics, Breakpoints. I can say Update Breakpoints here. So you don't have to wait a month. You can just come to the screen that's always been there. This option, Update Breakpoints, has always been there. You were always able to do that. The only problem with that is that WHONET didn't tell you that the new breakpoints were there. So now we just added on that new feature. Okay, so let me reopen that. File, open laboratory, file. Oh no, data entry is what I want to do. So now you can see here, these are the questions for the E. coli TriCycle project. Here I am in human, animal, food. I can go to environment. Oh, I guess we haven't done that. So Adam, we do need to customize this a bit. I think everything went here. So here at the bottom, these are the special TriCycle questions. The media, the month, the ESBL dilution 1, dilution 2, dilution 3. Okay, so in answer to your question, when people want to do the E. coli TriCycle project, we send them this file. And then they just start doing data entry using that configuration I just demonstrated. What we can easily do is we can just add it here and just add it to, we'll either call it WHO GLASS 1 Health, or to be clear, we might just call it WHO GLASS E. coli TriCycle. So I hope that answers the question. If you want to start on E. coli TriCycle now, write to us and we'll send you that configuration file I just showed. Alternatively, just wait and it'll be up on there before the end of July. Any other questions that have come in? And if you have questions, please start adding them now. And of course, I'm happy to stay on. Officially, we're ending this in 6 minutes, but I'm happy to stay on after that. If you need to drop off, please, of course, feel free to drop off. Okay, I'm going through some. Yes, Adam?
There's one there from Zerva.
Sure. Zerva from NIH Pakistan. So say hello to Afrinish. We do work very closely with you at NIH Pakistan. Can you please talk about the, in fact, I think we have a training workshop, a One Health workshop in Pakistan, I think scheduled for October, November. That will be coordinated by the University of Massey and the Fleming Fund AMRO project. It's antimicrobial resistance One Health. So it should be in Pakistan, hopefully, if the dates permit, in whatever month it will be. And if I can't go in person, obviously, we'll join remotely. Okay. Can you please talk about the historical data analysis using WHONET to perform the trend analysis of AMR, especially using RAS sample files from previous years? How we use WHONET files to do that? Happy to demonstrate that. I'm just going to scan their other questions if there's a quick answer. Because of the widespread use of MALDI-TOF for identification, there are several new organisms and nomenclature changes. Are there any updates planned, changed by the end user? I realize this could affect breakpoints. We've done a lot of work on that. So the organism nomenclature should be quite up to date. We are utilizing this a couple of related resources. I'll come back and answer the other question, but this is a faster question to answer. There's a website, Catalog of Life, with a new initiative that's not ready yet called the Catalog of Life Plus. So for example, if I search for Klebsiella and genus, it has the official names of all the different Klebsiellas and their history and their nomenclature. They're working on Catalog of Life Plus, which is not ready yet. For example, one problem with Catalog of Life, if it's to look for Plasmodium, Plasmodium, there it is. It only does Plasmodium genus. It does not have, well, let me do that again. Plasmodium. It has Plasmodium genus, but it does not have the species. So it doesn't have Malariae, Ovale, Falciparum, Vivax, etc. It only says Plasmodium. So Catalog of Life needs an update. So Catalog of Life Plus is coming. There's another website called GBIF. I forget what it stands for, Global Bio, that's not the right one, and I misspelled it, GBIF, Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So Adam has downloaded the database. So I think all of our nomenclature is up to date. If not, let us know, and we're happy to go back and revisit that. Especially sometimes things are not accepted yet. They're published, but they're not accepted. It used to be called the International Journal of Systematic Microbiology. That used to keep track of it. They reorganized it. So if there's a nomenclature issue, let us know. There's a different issue, what is or is not on the WHONET list. So we keep up to date the nomenclature for things on the list. This has been very big recently for the fungi. You know, the fungi, it's a big mess nomenclature-wise, but it's been becoming more stable, but it's still a mess. But WHONET should be accurate according to GBIF. But what is on there are things not on the list. And as you said, multi-top, there are many additional things. So we've been adding a lot. People send us a request or send us a list. We cannot add like 1,000 more because it's hard to come up with 3-letter codes. If people send us 10, 20, 30, we come up with semi-meaningful codes. So just let us know for anything that's incomplete that you feel should be on the list. We did a lot of that for FAO. Regarding regarding the animal pathogens. So we did have a very major expansion of that list to incorporate additional food and animal pathogens. I did skip that one question. I'll come back to it. Updates, I said. Can you talk about antifungal breakpoints? Thank you, John. We'll okay, I'm going to come back to the question about trends, time trend analysis. I'm going to go to data analysis, and I'm going to go to that same One Health database. I'm going to do the summary. Let me do all the gram negatives. Let me do that same One Health. I'm in the wrong configuration again. Let me do the WHONET test laboratory, not the TriCycle one. Data analysis and summary and okay, and all the gram negatives and that One Health database. You've already seen this. I have one row for each of the organisms. I click on continue. I can use the stratification variables. So I would like to see, for example, here, the specimen date by year. Well, all of these are the same year, so I'm just going to show it by month. I say okay. I say begin analysis. So now you can see the Campylobacter for the 6 months. There weren't any in February. So that's how you would do it. So here I have Campylobacter species for the months. I have the E. coli for the different months. So I hope that's clear, that you take advantage of these row stratification variables. I want specimen date by year to do the long-term trends, but I'm only showing you 6 months of data. By quarter, by week, quarter might be interesting. I should have 2 quarters here. First quarter, second quarter. First quarter, second quarter. I showed an example earlier where I did this by origin. I did human animal food. I can also do it by laboratory. That's not going to be very interesting in this example because it's only one lab. But here I see one row for the test laboratory. If I have a national network with 10 labs, I will see one row for each of those laboratories. So as a national data manager, stratifying by lab is very valuable. For long-term trends, stratifying by year is very valuable. So I hope that answers your question about how you can do it. If you have a question on a specific time frame, I can go to isolates and I can say specimen date. And I can say, for example, January 1st, 2000 through January 20th, 2000. I didn't type a correct date. Okay. So even though the file is 6 months of data, I've got the wrong year. It's not, I put 2000, it's 2020. We recently changed it just to update the year. Let's put here 2020, okay? So even though the file is 6 months, this is a subset. It's a filtered subset, okay? So sometimes if I want a smaller period of time, I would put a filter. If I want to look at trends, I put it as one of my stratification variables. I can do that with any of the dates, specimen date, date of birth. Sometimes in a reference lab, you'll have receipt date. The sample was collected Monday, but the reference lab received it Wednesday. So you can, any of the date variables, you can do the same by any of these variables here. So I hope that answers the question about that. The next question was about fungi. So, well, we just copy and paste them out of the documents. I'll show you the EUCAST website. Go to EUCAST. I mentioned earlier the veterinary. So AST of veterinary pathogens, they have not yet published a lot. They have their guidance, they have their florfenicol. Eventually, they'll have full tables here with all of their breakpoints. Work in progress. Their clinical breakpoints are here. Breakpoints and guidance. Did I click, Adam, did I click on the right menu option on the left? Clinical breakpoints,
For
it
the
should be
fungi?
here. No, for the bacteria. EUCAST news, new definitions of SIR. So anyone interested in the SIR category, it's described here. Clinical breakpoints and dosing. Clinical break. Oh, it is clinical breakpoints for fungi. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I was looking at the wrong page. Okay, this is correct. This is correct. Yeah. So the clinical breakpoints, it says for printing. I don't know why it says for printing. It's PDF. For screen, it's for Excel. But of course, PDF is also for the screen. So I don't know why I think screen is a bit confusing. The second one is the Excel version, and the PDF is the first version. So if I click here, this is the bacteria. It has just downloaded an Excel file. Even though Excel seems to be useful for data manager, you have to keep in mind there are all these footnotes. So here it says like 16 footnote 1, but for data manager, that's a number 161. So even though EUCAST has these free of charge and available, I can't use this as a programmer because you got all those footnotes and the formatting, and you got footnotes off in the right hands. You have interpretive criteria off in the comments column as well. So, but anyway, so this is the bacterial one. Let me go back. The fungal one, clinical breakpoints fungi. And clinical breakpoints for fungi, PDF and Excel. Good. This time they actually labeled it as PDF and Excel. I would recommend they update the other one to make it less confusing. So this is the fungal one. And then your technical uncertainty, so here are the breakpoints for Candida and Cryptococcus, breakpoints for Aspergillus. That's on the EUCAST side. On the CLSI side, if I go to CLSI free, there are some free resources. You can't download it, but you can query it. You can read it online. You can screen grab the most relevant things that you would like to refer to later. So if I click on the CLSI free, there's the human stuff on the left and the veterinary stuff on the right. It's not all of the documents, and they did change this recently. No, a login previously was not required, whereas a login is now required. I log in. This whole website's been reorganized. If you haven't looked at it recently, you may want to do it. So the M100 is free. That's routine bacteriology. The M45 is fastidious organisms like Campylobacter, a bunch of others. M27, M44S, that's a confusing name for the old M59, M60. So this is fungal for yeast. And then there's a different document. I think it's the M61 for mold. I might not have it exactly correct, but something like that. M23 is how do you make breakpoints and QC ranges, so ignore the M23s. But the M27, M44, this is the table of contents. So for example, if I go to table 1 is about how to test. Table 2, no, it's organized in a different way. Here they are, table 5 here, I guess. So here are the breakpoints for the Candida and where to find them. So I mentioned the category SDD before. This is not new for CLSI for fungi. This goes back to maybe 2003, 2004. SDD's been on the fungal side for a very long time. And IT-wise, people just treated it like an eye because they weren't ready for SDD. And then around 2012, they tried to introduce SDD specifically for cefepime. There was so much pushback in that first year that CLSI gave it a year break. So they delayed the introduction of SDD by a year for cefepime, and then they started to introduce a few others. There's still not many. Adam, you counted recently. How many SDDs are there?
Really just a handful. I don't remember the exact number.
It's a very small number, so it's mostly fungi, cefepime, and a few other things. So it's still a relatively infrequent category. But it was important we get it in, so we finally got it in this year. So I don't know specifically what your question is, but basically we just treat it the same way we do with the bacteria, but we just go to the relevant CLSI or EUCAST document. Yeah, so I discussed it a bit. Thank you very much. While entering data, why can't we edit after saving if 2 different samples received with the same patient? Okay, so this is a limitation of WHONET. We don't have a short-term solution for it, but I'm going to go new data file, replace, and I'm going to say well, let's say John Stelling, male, let's see. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Location, I'll put this. Specimen number, put that. Put today's date. Put here Staph aureus, specimen type blood, Staph aureus, etc. So then I can put my Staph aureus antibiotics, and I'll put. Giving myself a very susceptible Staph aureus. Okay, good. Save that. I would like to continue, and I would like to continue with the same patient. The Staph aureus is now saved. Oh, I meant I didn't mean to do that. Let me do this again. Today's date. Specimen date today, blood. Let me put E. coli. Let me give myself a very resistant one. 66666. Okay, good. And if I click, I just clicked on continuing the same patient. That's not what I meant to do. What I meant to do is save the isolate and continue with the same specimen. When I continue with the same specimen, those 3 topper boxes are unchanged. Same patient, same specimen, same dates, but instead of an E. coli, in addition to the E. coli, the patient also has a streptococcus pneumonia. I put the strep pneumonia result, and I can put my 30, my 25, my 10, and then I can go to the E-test, and I can type my 1 and 2 and 4, and then I save it. So when I'm creating it, I don't have to retype the patient information. And I just like to save the isolate, and now I'm back at a blank screen. So this is as intended. I entered the information once. When I view database, both records are there, the staph, the E. coli, and the strep pneumonia, but they're not linked together. So if you have to edit something, you have to edit them separately. So for example, edit the isolate. And I said, I forgot to put the date of birth. This is not my true date of birth. So I can add information later, save the isolate. And then I go to the second record, edit isolate, and I type in here. So I can do it, but because it's not a relational database, I have to edit the records separately. I can edit here using what we call the form view, or I can also edit the table directly. So here, if I click on edit table, the nice thing with edit table, I can just do copy paste. So I'm going back to your question. Yes, you can do it, but you have to edit each record separately. WHONET does not have a sophisticated relational database, which has many advantages, speed, simplicity, etc. But it does have a problem when you want to go back and edit things. This is not an issue for people downloading data because you have a relational database. We're just working with an export. But it is an issue for WHONET if you want to go back and edit things. You just edit each one separately. Could you please spoil on new cumulative antibiogram features you're working on? Well, some of them aren't ready yet. For example, right now in WHONET, I is intermediate. We would like to offer a feature, continue. I'll just mention at least 2 of them that come to mind right now. There are these things called language and dates and antibiotic codes. Like people know the WHONET codes, but there's also official WHO codes that they stopped doing many years ago. It's no longer current. There were German codes and Japanese codes. So you can customize WHONET so that on the screen you see the German codes or the Japanese codes. Internally, we don't change anything because that would corrupt the data. That's one example of customization. Languages and dates. You can customize to other languages. I won't demonstrate that. I've demonstrated that previously. Configuration. You can say my data are on the C drive, or you can change it. I would like to use this font. I would like to put in these cluster detection features. I would like to use a caliper for measuring my dish diffusion zone diameters. These are features that currently exist. There are some features we would like to add about preferences. For example, in WHONET, I is intermediate, but for EUCAST it isn't. So we want to put preferences that I should be labeled as susceptible with increased exposure. So this feature is not ready yet. So we need to work on this feature so the display matches the European terminology. That's one example. Another example is here under the antibiogram. I've already shown you this antibiogram. I'm just going to bring it up again. Data files. Let me just go back to the human health one. So human health, a lot more gram negatives. So here you see the percent susceptible. Clinicians, pharmacists like percent susceptible because they're making treatment guidelines. They want an antibiotic with good susceptibility. But microbiologists often prefer percent resistant or percent non-susceptible because they're tracking emerging resistance. Okay? However, because of the new I and S in Europe, they'd like to see the I and they would like to see the S. And right now in WHONET, you have to do it separately. They'd have to look for the percent I and they have to look for the percent S, and then they would have to merge the two together. As you can see, this is what we call a drop-down list. You must select one of these options, percent S or percent I. We would like to make this into a drop-down checkbox or multi-combo box so that I would like to see the percent S and the percent I. So that way, when I run the analysis, I'm now looking at the percent I, but it would be more valuable to give the user control over what they see. Do they want to see R and I and S? Do they want to see S and I? Do they want to see S and I combined? So these are some things that would be related, because it's related to things like meningitis and non-meningitis and susceptible, truly susceptible is percent S. But therapeutically, percent I should also be part of that in terms of the European definition. So this is programming that we're in the middle of, and that is not yet ready. Also, I mentioned the terminology. It should not be called percent intermediate. It should be called percent susceptible, dose dependent. Part of the antibiogram is not only about new WHONET features, it's really going to be a conversation about bias. WHONET describes extremely well the samples that arrive in the laboratory, but it does not describe well what's out in the community when people are not sampled. So the lab can say, yes, we had 20 E. coli and 5 of them were resistant. That's completely accurate. But I cannot, so that's 50% resistant, but I cannot say what's happening out in the community because I take samples from who? Complicated people, treatment failures, patients in the ICU. So one important element of the antibiogram discussion is not new WHONET features, but just increased awareness of these issues of bias. WHONET tells you extremely well about the data in the laboratory, but it doesn't tell you about treatment guidelines directly. We don't want you to say, in my own hospital, I'll give you an example when I first started. They said, the pharmacy, John, we have a new antibiotic, imipenem. What is resistance like in Klebsiella? I looked at it. Oh, yeah, it's 20% resistant. They say, how can it be 20% resistant? It's a new drug. I say, yeah, but we only tested it 5 times. We had like 800 Klebsiella and imipenem was not routinely tested 30 years ago. We only tested it, special circumstances. So it was resistant 1 time out of 5. 1 time out of 5 is 20%. The statistic is accurate and completely misleading and non-representative. So this is an example not of sampling bias. This is an example of testing bias. So an important element of the antibiogram webinar will be the WHONET features related to antibiograms, but another element will be guidance on bias and interpretation, burden of disease. Laboratory data typically severely underestimate how much disease there is because samples are not taken, but overestimates resistance rates because we take samples from the most resistant patients with treatment failures and long ICU stays. One other feature that we'll put in is we had the webinar about these WHONET standard reports, patient and sample statistics, organism statistics, isolate alerts, epidemiology. On that webinar, I demonstrated the organism and antibiotic statistics and the epidemiology report and the test practices report. Those of you with good eyes might notice number 1 has been deleted. We removed our old number 1. The old number 1, I wrote myself 20 years ago. It's out of date. The other ones are better. So the numbers have changed here. The new number 1 is the old number 2. So you do have this valuable epidemiology report. And let me just do a quick example on this. So we would like to create a new one called the antibiogram report. On the lower left-hand side, you see a large number of analyses, cluster alerts. It's now doing the GLASS statistics. And it's doing a simple gram-positive antibiogram and a simple gram-negative antibiogram. We would like to make an antibiogram analysis, which made antibiograms in an additional way. Inpatient, outpatient, blood, urine. There's an interesting concept like antibiogram on hospital day 3 and later. for more of the hospital-acquired bacteria. So that feature does not exist yet. It's not difficult to do, but we have so many things we're trying to balance, and that's the webinar will happen after we've introduced those new features that I described. As you can see in the lower left, the analyses have finished. It is now creating the Word document. It is up to the GLASS statistics. It's now doing outbreak detection. It's on the final section called antibiogram. And it should now be finishing up. WHONET will ask me, do you want to open the document? I will say yes. I will then open the document. Whoops, there it is. Taking a high-level view, we had a webinar on this. It's a lot of different kinds of graphs, different statistics, different analyses. Here in the right on the red, yellow, orange, that's WHO priority resistance. In the red here, outbreak detection. I'm going to zoom back in so you can actually read it again. So now we have this antibiogram page. Anything with at least 20 isolates. I'll also talk about things like 1 per patient. Why is it 1 per patient? The different options for 1 per patient. The CLSI official recommendation is 30 isolates. We use 20 because 30 is not a magic number. And if you want to go 30, you can delete anything. But if you have like 29, I mean, that's still interesting information. If I had 25 Klebsiella oxytoca, I might delete it. It's not as important as Klebsiella pneumonia. Salmonella typhi, that's very important. So if I have 25 Serratia rubidiae, I might delete it. It's not that important in an organism for empiric therapy decisions. If I have 25 Salmonella typhi, that's important. Therefore, in WHONET, we use the threshold of 20, and then you can decide what you would like to show. We have the simple gram-positive antibiogram, the simple gram-negative antibiogram. So we will make a WHONET report, either an Excel version or a Word version or both, so that we'll have not only these 2 basic antibiograms, but additional ones. I mentioned some examples: inpatient, outpatient, urine, non-urine. CLSI has other ones like an MRSA antibiogram or a CRE antibiogram. So I think that's it regarding the webinar preview for next time. I hadn't really thought about it, but those are the items that come to mind. And we're past time. I'm sure a lot of people have dropped off already. Oh, in fact, is there only 1 person left? I see one. There's
about 100 there. Left.
Oh, I'm sorry. That one must be one addition. So I got it. So just ignore
I think
that.
Dr. Nietzsche has a question. So I will enable their microphone if they would like to ask that question.
Sure, thank you.
And Dr. Nechita, you may enable your microphone and speak if you would like to speak. If not, you can just type your question.
I did some very nice comments on the right-hand side. Thank you so much for that. Oh, and Denise, nice to see you. Glad that we could get you all sorted out with your beaker export.
And if not, John, maybe we will just go to the next question while we wait.
Yes, sure. And what is the next question?
Let's see.
Okay, I just read from Herman in Mexico. Congratulations. I don't see a question there. We hope to be able to contribute more by working the accumulated biograms. So no question there. And I see from Durgesh, is it possible to distinguish between isolates from urban settings and rural settings with their associated antibiograms? So Durgesh, I see that.
That might be the last question I see.
I think that's it. Yes, there would be 2 ways to do that. One way is at the time of data entry, you can get that information into the file. In the file, you could say that this isolate is urban, this isolate is district. You could decide that on the basis of the patient or where the laboratory is. You can also do that in backlink. If you have that information in your original database, you can capture that as part of backlink's data capture. So the information is in the database. They do something like this in United Arab Emirates. In the database that they receive, they know the name of the laboratory. Off the top of their head, they do know which emirate it is. The United Arab Emirates has 7 emirates. Everybody knows Dubai and Abu Dhabi. The others I don't remember. Sharjah, Gamal Quain, Fajira. You give me Al Quain. Eventually, get all seven. It's nice because I went scuba diving there once. So the United Arab Emirates has seven emirates. The name of the emirate is not in the data file, but they know where it is. So when they do backlink, they create a new field for emirate. So as they're backlink it in, they say for this laboratory, it's a fixed value. This data is all from Abu Dhabi. Therefore, when they analyze the data, they can do what I was showing you earlier. They would go to the drop-down thing and they would say, which emirate is it? So if the information is in the file, then it becomes very easy. You just simply have a diff field and then you can do a filter on it, or you can do a stratification variable on it. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is less convenient, but also works. Here under data files, I'm going to choose all of the files. Well, I'll just choose the SQLite files. And for example, I can create a macro. I've just chosen several laboratories here, and I'm going to say OK. So I just chose data files. I'm going to call this a macro, and I'm going to say new macro. These
and John,
are my
if you can share your screen once again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. It's important. A lot going on in my mind at once. The screen. OK, so let me just repeat that. So here I'm going to data analysis. And I'm going to go to data files, and I'm going to choose all of the files. And as an example, maybe these are the files from the urban centers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a macro which groups them together. I clicked on macro, I click on new macro, and I can say urban laboratories. I say save, exit. And then I can go back and I can clear my list, and then I can see all of my SQLite files. And then I can say these are all of my, I'm going to go to macros, I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to say rural laboratories. Okay, save. What does this offer me? This means that I can come back tomorrow and I can go to macros and I can say, I can load up all of my urban laboratories together and I can do analysis on them, and then I can export the results to Excel. After I've done that, I can then do the rural ones. They are rural laboratories, load macro, and then I export to Excel. And then in Excel, I can start merging and combining them together. So in short, if the information is in the file, like in United, which emirate is it rural? Is it community hospital? Is it university hospital? If you have that information in the file, then the analyses become very convenient, and you can use the isolates to filter on some of them, or you can use the stratification variables like row 1, row 2, row 3, or column. You can do the same with the columns. So it's in the data file. That's the easiest. If it's not in the data file, you just have to do the analysis separately. Macros makes that more convenient. And then what you can do is you just combine the data in Excel. These are things that you can do with WHONET. Of course, a lot of you on the phone are very good IT people, and people will go into Access or Excel or SQLite or DB Browser, and they will start manually adding these additional fields themselves. They don't have to use WHONET to add columns. They can use other softwares for database manipulation. So I hope that answers the question. If you'd like further details in your specific setting, just write us an email and we can provide a more specific comment. I think, Adam, that's all the questions. Went half an hour over. Any comments? We do look forward to your input on our training course materials. The exams will be there once we get through the FAO course, make sure that the exams are good questions, people are happy with it. And we also want to make the scoring, right now it's semi-automatic and semi-manual. Once it's fully automatic, then we can open up to the world and have automatic certificates. So we're working in that direction. We'll work with OpenWHO now, but FAO, WHO Academy, will start to establish our connections with the FAO Learning Academy and the virtual learning centers. We weren't ready to go to them because our materials weren't ready, but I feel the materials are ready now. Thank you for your time and efforts, and you do the important part of work. We do the easy stuff. We get the software ready, but you're there talking to your clinicians, your microbiologists, your national authorities, your advocates, your fundraisers. So good luck with your work, and we look forward to seeing you by email, in person, and on the next webinar. Thank you, Adam, for your support in facilitating this, and thank you to the rest of my team for the work that all is represented here in this sorts workshop. Adam, let's leave it open for a bit in case there are more questions. Then if you could copy paste the chat, so just in case anything came up earlier we want to capture.
Yes, one new question has come from James.
Yes. So anyone dropping off, feel free to drop off, and I'll just continue to answer questions as long as we have questions. Someone's asking, can we use both CLSI and EUCAST simultaneously? Yes, you definitely can. I am still sharing my screen. I'm going to go to File, New Laboratory, and I simply say I want this antibiotic, this antibiotic, this antibiotic by CLSI. And then I say EUCAST, and I say I want these antibiotics by EUCAST. So I can also combine e-tests. So yeah, it is very, very simple to combine EUCAST and CLSI. There's one thing that is not yet possible that I would like to do eventually. It's not a big priority. Most countries do CLSI or EUCAST. Very few countries, it's a mixture. There was a mixture in Europe while they transitioned to EUCAST, but mixture of CLSI and EUCAST is quite rare now. There's an additional feature I'd like to introduce, but it's a low priority right now. For data analysis, WHO test laboratory, open laboratory, data analysis. WHONET does have this very nice feature called combined disk MIC test. This is useful within a laboratory if you do some of your tests by disk and some of your laboratories by e-test, some of your isolates by e-test. Like, for example, for Streptococcus pneumonia, well, no, something like imipenem. If people find imipenem resistance by disk, they'll often confirm it by an e-test, so they do both. So with this feature, WHONET will combine those statistics together. I don't want to know the percent RIS of imipenem in disk and separately imipenem resistance in e-test. I want to combine those two rows together. That's the purpose of this feature. It would make sense to allow a similar feature for combining EUCAST, combine EUCAST and CLSI. So that feature makes sense. There's not a great demand for it because very few countries combine them. Europeans did, but they've all migrated over to ESBL, at least with the European Union project, the ESBL. CSER is the Central Asia Eastern European. I don't know if it's a requirement. They're not European Union. The European Union for ESBL requires EUCAST. That's from EMEA, European Medicines Agency, or European Medicine something agency. But anyway, so it's possible CSER also to CLSI, I don't recall. It makes sense to have that feature combine CLSI and EUCAST. Here, if you have e-test and MIC and disk, one takes precedent. The e-test would replace the MIC or replace the disk. You can choose your other options. We could do that with CLSI and EUCAST. If the two disagree with each other, should we take the EUCAST or the CLSI, or the more resistant one or the more susceptible one? So the feature does make sense, but nobody has really been asking for it. Adam, any other questions?
I think that's all for now, unless anyone has any other questions.